Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is Sonship Establishment, and we're in the notes that cover sessions 51 to 54. These are right at the end of 52. So there's a couple things we need to do to finish up this first section and get ourselves going on the next one. I was talking to you about what's going to be happening here at the judgment seat of Christ when you're going to be given your position and the government is going to begin to be formed, and you're going to know exactly where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing. Now, you have to understand this, that when we get up there and that's happening, I mean, Kathy said, I want to be in Jackie's group, not Ron's, okay, now at the break. But you do understand that when Ron gets his position, the whole body of Christ is going to cheer. No, they are. Even Kathy. Let me show you a verse. And I realize this verse is not talking about the judgment seat of Christ. What it is talking about is the way a local assembly is supposed to conduct itself so that it puts into practice the very principles that it will be utilizing once it gets out in the creature. So here it is, 1 Corinthians chapter 12. No, keep going. Let's see. 1 Corinthians 12:1. Yeah, well, that's at 6. 6, you're right. 6, 26. There it is. Okay. And rather one member suffer, all the members suffer with it, or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. And that's supposed to be happening in a local assembly. Now, I know that at the judgment seat of Christ, there's not going to be any suffering up there. I mean, I get that. But believe me, what is supposed to be happening here is what's going to be happening up there. And it won't matter what position someone is in. If the whole there's not going to be anybody standing in the back going, well, I knew they'd make Francis one of those. I just knew it. There won't be any of that. They're going to rejoice with whatever it is. There won't be anybody hollering from the back, hey, you should have done better. You know, there won't be any of that. This body is going to function the right way. All right. Now, the formation of that new government, let's talk about when Satan and his angels are going to get deposed. Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she hath a place prepared of God. They should feed her there 1,260 days. And you know from all of our times in the book of Revelation that when you're in Bible prophecy, months are always, and the Jews used a 30-day month. It's just every once in a while they added a month, which made the thing come out even. They didn't do months with, and isn't that easier than January, February, March, April, May? Okay, May has 31 days. Do you do that? See, it's real easy on the other way, but this is 42 months of 30 days apiece. And so what we realize is this woman actually, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, there's more details in the notes, but at the midway point of the tribulation, when Satan no longer acts like Israel's Messiah, but now their oppressor, the woman, Israel, is going to flee into the wilderness for the last 42 months of the tribulation. And so that's a time element. You can see that that's going to start right here, and that's where she'll be. Now look at this next verse. And there was war in heaven. And that's not the third heaven, folks. That's the second heaven. That's the creature. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. If I had given you the next verses, do you remember where Satan and his angels are cast? No. This happens right here at the midway point of the tribulation. No. Turn to Revelation chapter 12. Let me just show it to you. You remember it? Okay, Revelation. They're cast to the earth, and it says, and woe to the inhabitants of the earth, for the devil is come down to you, having great wrath, because he knoweth he hath but a short time. That's right. He's got 3.5 years. That's all he's got left. And so, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because they get cast out here. Now, you may look at that and you may say, well, wait a minute, Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. I thought we were going to be kicking them out. Listen to me carefully. you do understand that when Corinthians talks about we shall judge angels, that word judge means command or administrate over. And you are going to be administrating over angels. And when those angels go to conduct that battle, it's going to be sons who are going to coordinate that conflict. Now, you may say to yourself, do I get to grab one angel, though, and just throw him to the air? I mean, I would love to just get one of them just to know what that feels. But you have to understand, and as a son, guess what? If you want to, you can. But you have another responsibility when that's going on. If all the commanders leave what they're doing to go join in the battle, pretty soon the whole thing degenerates into chaos. Someone has to orchestrate that. Someone has to oversee that. And that's going to be your job. Now, if you when angels are doing things up in the heavenly places, if you want to go get involved in that, you can, but not to the neglect of what you're there to do. Are you with me? You ever been on a job where the guy that was in charge really enjoyed the field work so much, he neglected his leadership position, and pretty soon everything is just chaotic. Nobody knows. There's no direction to what's going on. Well, you can't let that happen. So you have a job to do, but you are going to be there. You are going to see it take place, and you're going to orchestrate what's going to be happening in that battle. That's where you are in the mix. And as soon as that happens at the midway point, that war in heaven, and Satan and his angels are cast to the earth, we're going to move into those positions. So what is happening between here and here? That's when everyone is going through that judgment seat, getting that heir of God inheritance, and then getting some of us that joint heir inheritance, getting your position in the creature sorted out, putting that government together, because the very next thing on your calendar, folks, is to move into those seats. And like I said at the end of the last session, that day is coming. That's a real day. That's not pie in the sky, by and by. That day is coming. And that's a glorious liberty for the creature. That's where we got off on that. The glorious liberty of the children of God. And when the whole body of Christ comes flying up into the heavens, can you imagine the creature thinking, at last? You know, or as Mel Gibson said when Danny Glover pulled him out of the water about to drown, what took you so long? Well, I don't know if the creature will be saying that, but it is going to be a glorious liberty. Now, we got off on that just because I had already taken you over here about the new heavens and the new earth, and I thought while we're there, let me give you a timeline for your installation into the creature. But you don't understand, Paul, even though we're reading about things that give rise to questions about very interesting things, Paul does not go to the trouble to tell you about those things in Romans 8, and here's why. The doctrine we're in Romans 8 is very specific to produce something in you, and if you didn't know any of what I just told you, that doctrine could still be produced. You don't need to get, in fact, if you're not careful, you'll get sidetracked with the really fun stuff to look at and lose the thing that you're really supposed to be after. So what your Father's doing here is he's giving you exactly what you need to know in order for something to get produced in you. And what is that something? It is Romans chapter 8 and verse 18, because at the end of this section of Scripture, which starts in verse 16 and runs through 25, that is supposed to produce a patient endurance in you. That verse 18, you, just like Paul, reckon. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. And I've got news for you. As soon as you get into that glory, all of that suffering that qualified you for that position is not even going to come into your mind anymore. It won't be remembered. You're not going to, 1,000 years later, you're not going to bump into Tommy and Tommy's going to go, well, I remember when my back hurt really bad. He's not going to be doing that. You're going to be looking at a glory that makes anything you go through pale in comparison. And that's what the reckoning of verse 18, all of this is the doctrine to make that verse a living reality in you. And if you don't have that set in you, by the time you start the curriculum, you're going to encounter some trouble. That's got to be a settled issue, and that's why it's part of your establishment. Everybody with me there? Now, if you say, well, I don't know that I have all that yet. Well, don't worry about it, because we're just in the early part of this. We're going to go all the way to verse 25 to get this done. All right. Now, in this next part, and what I did was at the first of this, I had 4 phrases that I wanted to make sure everybody understood, but I think everybody gets it. The only one that I want to go over and make sure that you get is the one where the creature was made subject to vanity. I just want to make sure everybody understands. I know the normal way we define vanity today in our society by usage is excessive pride. The Bible talks about that kind of issue, but not here, and not in most of the places where it uses the word vain or the word vanity. What that means is empty, worthless, useless, non-functional, all of that kind of bit. And that was the primary meaning of vanity. When God talks about Israel's vain religious system, that thing is worthless, you remember. When James talks about the apostate element of the nation, he says this man's religion is vain. He's not talking about he's always primping in front of the mirror. He's talking about this man's religion isn't producing what he thinks it's producing. It's worthless. It's empty. It's not going to do what he thought it was going to do. God made the creature subject to vanity so that Satan couldn't utilize him for his purposes. I just want to make sure we got that vanity thing cleared out. All right, now, at this point, I could talk to you some more about that glory issue, but really, I think that you can go through the notes and you can see, we've already said enough about glory that I think you can get that. I just want to make sure that you understand that word. Give me that. What's the next verse up, Trent? Keep going. One more. Let's do that right there. I just want to make sure that you understand that word glorious, that's the impact word for you. That's the word that's supposed to make you realize, because that word glorious takes you right back. The sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. And that's a real glory. Now, it's not a pretend, it's not a fake, and it's not a hope so. It's a real issue, and he's calling that back to your mind when he describes the kind of liberty that the creature is going to be delivered into from that bondage of corruption. Okay. Now I want to take you to verse 22. So give me that next slide there. There you go. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Now I have to tell you that we're talking about an issue now that when I get through talking with you about it, you're going to say, well, that was easy. You have no idea what I went through to get to where I am on this. I mean, my whole week was invested in getting this wrong until I finally got it right. And I know you're going to look at the end of that, and you're going to go, well, he's just stupid because that looks easy to me. But it's going to look easy because I'm just going to give it to you that way. But I'm going to tell you, getting from point A to point B was no easy task. I'm trying to get you to feel sorry for me right now. You're just not cooperating at all. Thank you. I feel a little better now. This thing gave me absolute fits, and you'll see why as we go through verses 22 and 23. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Well, look, let me give you this now. What you have, it starts out talking about our inheritance, right? And the suffering, if so be that we suffer with him. See, it started out talking about us, And then in verse 19, it changed and it talked about the creature. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God, right? Okay. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who has subjected the same in hope, right? And then 21, guess what? It's the creature again, right? And we just got out of that verse. So it's about the creature. And you know what the creature is. It's the heavens, okay? The creature. It's the creature, the creature, the creature. And now in verse 22, he changes, and instead of saying the creature, now he says the whole creation. Well, if the creature is the heaven, what is the whole creation? The heaven and the earth. And I had a bunch of references in your notes. I'm only going to give you one. When God created everything, it's either contained in the heaven or in the earth. And that's why you have verses in there that talk about when God made the heaven and the earth and all that in them is. So everything gets wrapped up in the term, the whole creation. That would be the heaven and the earth, right? So now you're incorporating both of them into something. And that's important to remember, because you're going to run into a word in a moment that if you don't realize what's going on here, you're going to say to yourself, what is that? And you'll see it in just a moment. For we know that listen, let me just get to the verse myself here. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Let's see. Is that right? Am I at that right place? I'm just really deciding how much of this to say to you, because I'm just looking at the time, which is really, hold on, I've got a halfway marker in my notes. If I have time at the end, I'm going to come back and give you these verses. But I'm not going to give them to you now. I'm just going to give it to you verbally and wrap it up. Because what's happening when things are happening in the repossession of the earth and the repossession of the heavens, it doesn't all happen at one fell swoop. Remember, there's a new heavens and a new earth, yes. But on the earth, here's what's really going to happen. All right, and here, let's do the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, and here's the Dead Sea that comes down here. Here's Egypt down this way, and let's put the river Euphrates going out through this way. When Israel gets that land grant over in the millennium, that runs from the river of Egypt all the way up to the Euphrates. I mean, they have a big land parcel, okay? And when they get that whole land area, when the millennium starts, and you remember we read all of that? And these are the verses I'm leaving out. The desert shall bloom as the rose, and streams will break forth in the parched land, and all of that kind of terminology. And it's in your notes. Well, all of that is happening in the kingdom, but listen carefully. It's happening in the kingdom in the land of Israel only in the beginning. Only as the word, and Jerusalem sits about right here, only as the word of the Lord goes out from Jerusalem, and those nations submit themselves not only to the King of Kings who is sitting on the throne of David in Jerusalem, but also to the nation God has made the head of all nations. Only then do they get those blessings. In fact, the verses I'm omitting reading that are in your notes talk about if they don't. For instance, if they don't come up and worship the King on the Feast of Tabernacles, he said, on them there'll be no rain. On them there'll be a plague. Those are not the things of the kingdom. What's going to happen is here's a nation that's not going to submit, and they're going to be having all of the continual sufferings that just come. And here's a nation next to them that submitted, and you know what's going to happen? Disease will start going away. The lame will leap as a hart. The desert will break forth with streams. Suddenly that place is going to look like the Garden of Eden. Produce is everywhere. People are not having the disease that everybody else has. The curse is taken off the animal kingdom, and the lion and the kid lay down together, and the lion eats straw like an ox. But in their land, it's not going to be that way. He talks about a highway that's going to be built to see the king at the Feast of Tabernacles. And some of those lands, when you come through, if they haven't submitted, there's going to be ravenous beasts on that highway. So if I was planning a trip, I'd be planning it through the nations that said, okay. But on those that submit, he says, and there will be no lion or ravenous beast there. You don't have to worry about any of that. I just want you to see that. And doesn't that make sense? That only as they submit to that do they get the blessing. Well, guess what? Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder, you know what? He sees it planted right there in the land of Israel. Remember, he sees that. And the angels of God ascending and descending. That's an order. From here, this is that headquarters. They're going up. And this right now, during the kingdom, is the stopgap measure for the communication between heaven and earth. There's only one part of the heavens that has not joined Satan's rebellion, and that is that of which Michael is the principality. It is my own opinion, and I don't want to debate it. If you don't see it that way, I don't care. But up here, there is a connection with the heaven, and I believe, and because though some of those places in the heavens have a direct connection with geographical places on the earth. Hence, when Gabriel came to give Daniel the answer to his prayer, he was held up for 21 days in the heavens by the prince of Persia. And he talked about the prince of Grecia coming. But then when he talks to Daniel, he says, Michael is your prince. So what's that mean? The connection with Israel is Michael's place in the heavenlies. There's the connection. Stick the ladder in there, and guess what? You've got a place on this earth from which everything spreads out to repossess it back to God, and you've got a place in the heavens from which everything spreads out to repossess it back to God in the heavens. That makes perfect sense to me. Not only that, I tell you what else it gives rise to, the thought that if Michael had defected, that might have been a huge, huge error, because maybe Satan then would have been able to have joined heaven and earth together under his rule. I don't know how you'd undo that. I'm not saying it couldn't be undone. I'm saying I don't know how that would be. I can't imagine. I certainly don't know enough to be able to fix all that. But he did not. And I don't think it's an accident that it's the place in the heavens that has a direct connection to the land area that God has claimed for himself. See, I just don't think that's an accident. Okay. Anyway, I'm trying to show you that this is all a process. So yes, you get installed here, and there's things that are going to happen out of the heavens that happened in this last 3.5 years. Remember those big hailstones that are going to come down? The Bible talks about in Job the treasures of hail and rain that God has stored up in the heavens, and you're going to be sending angels to loose those things on the earth during that day of wrath. But let me tell you, when that is over and Satan's thrown in the bottomless pit, we've got 1,000 years now to do the work that we've got to do on the creature. The millennium is 1,000 years now for that thing to spread from Jerusalem to all the parts of the world, and then for God to lure out all of those that are opposed to the kingdom of Christ, and they'll be destroyed, the last great battle. But in the heavens, we've got 1,000 years now to tear down those satanic strongholds and to restore the creature back to a functioning position, so that after the times of restitution of all things, in the dispensation that follows, the dispensation of the fullness of times, we are going to bring all things in heaven and all things in earth into one under Jesus Christ. And when you do that, what you've done is you've made that spirit and soul be able to perfectly communicate with the body, and that thing is now able to function like a single creature. That's where that's headed. That's what you're going to do. You should have gone to med school. Because you're going to bring that kind of life back to the creature. We've got 1,000 years to do it. And it's a big job, by the way. The creature's huge. And I don't know if you can realize how many suns there are. You're going to be busy. That's all I'm going to tell you about that. Okay, now having leaped over all of those verses that actually talk about those issues, perfect. This gets me exactly where I want to do. I want to come right back to this verse. Yeah, here we go. For we know the whole creation. Give me the next one. Does it highlight? Don't give me the next one. No, keep going through them. Go through Isaiah. Keep going through Zechariah. Yeah, through Isaiah. Okay, there you go. For we know the whole creation. Here's the first thing. There's two things going on here. The first thing is it groaneth, and then it travaileth. Now, those are the two things that are going on. When I looked at those, I thought, okay, so the whole creation, which is the heaven and the earth, they are groaning and travailing in pain together until now. I don't want to, it's not important for me to prove this to you. I believe that's a real pain. I do. I believe the creature is a living organism, and I believe it's experiencing a real pain. But Paul does not pause here to do a dissertation on, let me tell you how the creature's hurting. That's not what's important, because he's trying to get you to reckon back to verse 18. And to do that, he just needs to make this point, that the whole creation is groaning and travailing in pain. Well, here's what I learned, that word groan is very specific as to oppose. We have this little saying, we go moan and groan. And those are synonyms, but there's a real important shade of difference there. Give me that next deal, because I think I have these definitions up. A groan, and I just used George Crabbe. I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary and in Smith's and Crabbe's, and all I'm doing is getting a feel for our language, okay? The Bible is going to have to bear witness to this, but look carefully. A deep sound produced by hard breathing, the involuntary expression of severe pain of either body or mind. And isn't that true? Let's talk about body. If you hurt your back and you move the wrong way, you don't think about it. You just go, And you weren't trying. It's notice this, the involuntary expression. The difference between a groan and a moan is, and this was great, when I looked that up, a moan is purposefully spoken in order to draw attention to one's plight. I went to school with a guy that he was sick and he wasn't feeling good and he was laying in his bunk, and we were it's just a one-room deal, you know, and he's laying in his bunk, and the whole day he was going, About 2 hours into that, I wanted to put him out of his misery. I did. I was praying, God, you know he's tired. He needs to go home. And he just, it just made me, it irritated me to no end. And you know what? The moan kind of carries with it the issue of complaint. And what do you do when your kids do that? Shut up. For those of you that are not quite so aggressive, you know, but when you're moaning, by the way, I told you back in sonship orientation, there was an indiscretion that the adversary would catch you in. And Paul gave the example to Timothy of a woman in his very assembly she's going through the sufferings of Christ, was moaning about the thing. And guess what Paul said? She's lost reward over that, because instead of properly responding to the suffering, she's complaining and whining about it. That's what a moan is. And so it was very interesting to me that this groan is the involuntary. You're not trying to show everybody. It's just happening. And it can be of mind too. It doesn't have to be of body. And when a woman tells her husband, my mom's coming to stay for 2 weeks, and he goes, he's just, it's an involuntary. Don't hold it against him. It's a biblical thing. Ladies, it's Bible. I'm just saying. But, and he's travailing it, never mind. So, travail. Here's the next word. Travail is laborious effort, severe toil, to labor with great difficulty. Now, when the Bible uses that word travail, about half the time, it equates that to one thing. Do you know what it is? A woman giving birth. She travailed in birth and pain to be delivered. or she was in the pangs of childbirth, and she travailed. And when it uses that word travail, it does that. And by the way, when it's talking about laborious effort and severe toil, it's not talking about she's out there behind two horses, plowing in the field. But when a woman is given birth, her body is going through labor with great difficulty. So that when she starts to do that, we say she went into labor. Yeah, exactly. That's the very term we use to describe that. Now, when you get to verse 22, it says, the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Do you know what? And by the way, he started out with, for we know. You know the creature, but back from Israel's program, you already know about the earth. In other words, the whole creation is under that bondage of corruption. The whole creation needs to be liberated. You're going to liberate the creature. Who's going to liberate the earth? See, God's going to use the Jewish nation to do that. He's got two different sets of people, two programs, two doctrines, two realms of vocation. And he's going to take care of the whole thing. And when it's all done, guess what? He'll own heaven and earth. That's what that's about. Okay. Give me that next one, Trent. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit. Even we grown with... Okay, that's that. No, I'm sorry. Back me up. Back me up one frame. I want to talk about the until now thing for a moment. Let me do that. Evidently, I've kind of got an order going on here. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. And here's the way I take the until now, because someone asked me, what does that mean, until now? The until now is, I take it to mean, when Paul wrote it, it was until now. And guess what? We're reading it in 2013, and it's still going on. I see the now as a continual action thing until that gets remedied. I don't think it's necessarily talking about the now of the dispensation of grace, because the creature was groaning under the bondage of corruption before Paul ever came along. So I'm just clarifying that, because that's a different issue. Some people teach that a little differently. I don't see that as a reference to the dispensation of grace. I just see that as the disposition of the whole creation since it began up till now. And folks that read that 5 years from now, that'll still be current. Okay, now, having said that, now let me take you to verse 23. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. This verse, after I did verse 22, gave me a fit, because in verse 23, now the thing is coming back to us, ourselves also. So you see what happened? He started with us, and he went to the creature, the creature, the creature. You got that down? Now we're talking about the whole creation, and now I'm going to take all that stuff I gave you, and I'm going to bring that right back around, and I'm going to make an application to you. And that's what he's trying to do with this. So let's take this a piece at a time. So give me that next slide, please, Trent. And not only they. Who is the they? The creature in the creature in the earth, right? They'll either say the whole creation, okay, or the creature in the earth. That's the they, because that's who it's been talking about, right? All right. And not only they, here's the next one, but ourselves also. So now that's where he's going to bring this back. By the way, are you under the bondage of corruption? Are you going to need that to be fixed? Okay, so I sure hope so. That's true, isn't it? All right. Ourselves also. Now look at this next phrase, which have the first fruits of the Spirit. You know what first fruits are. If you're talking about agriculture, it's that first set that comes in before the main harvest. But if you're talking about an enterprise or a business, first fruits It is the here it is. It's the initial results. It's the first thing that is produced, fruits, right? So he says, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit. Don't run over to the book of Galatians to figure this out. You haven't been given Galatians doctrine yet. Everybody wants to go, oh, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, meekness, right? That's not, that is the fruit of the Spirit. This is the first fruits of the Spirit. This is something that comes before that. That can only be one of two things. It is either everything you've gotten in the book of Romans up to this point, which includes your justification and your sanctification and your new identity in Christ, or what I think it is, more specifically, because of the very context and what this verse is saying, it begins when you are given the information about being a son in Romans 8:14 and 15, in which you are now told you're a son who's been given the spirit of adoption. And when you understand what that is and you want that, you respond to your Father with what? Abba, Father. That's the first part. And now in Romans 8, he's taken you through the very next part, and that is what your sonship is going to involve. And by now, you already know that creature's waiting on you. There's a glorious liberty that it's waiting on. It's groaning and travailing in pain. And the only ones that are going to alleviate that is you. That is the first fruits. And the reason I don't think it's this is because, look, in the context of this verse, you can know all about being justified and all about sanctified and all about your new identity in Christ, and that doesn't tell you a thing about what you're going to do with the creature. That is only right here in this context. So I think it's these two issues. It's the issue of knowing that you're a son and a response to say yes to your Father, and now he's moved you in to giving you a purpose in your sonship. That's the first fruits. That's what he's talking about here. And so give me that next slide and let me see where we are. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves grown within ourselves. Now, here's where I got into a problem. That word groaneth back there in verse 22, when we talked about groaneth, that was actually something separate that I wrote right here. We talked about that groaneth. Remember, that was the involuntary expression of pain, either physically or mentally or something. But when I read this, it seemed like it was identifying the word groan differently. And I looked at that and it says, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. And I thought, do you notice what got dropped off? Travailing in pain doesn't show up when he starts talking about us. He talks about groaning, and he doesn't talk about the verbal He says we groan within ourselves. And I got to looking at that and I thought, you know what? That groaning, so I go back and I look back in George Crabb's deal, and I look in Charles Smith's deal, and I look in Webster's 28, and I look in, the OED, and I get all that. And I'm going, they won't give me that definition. I don't know what's going on. And then I remember. Now remember, in level 1, you're talking about Romans doctrine, and then you have Corinthians, remember, that comes along. And if you get off track in Romans, Corinthians is the corrective doctrine for that. So even though it's ahead, the only thing Paul does in Corinthians is he brings them back to Romans doctrine that they evidently missed. I've shown you that over and over again. He's not teaching them anything in Corinthians they couldn't have already learned in Romans. So I thought about this, and take a look at 2 Corinthians, talking about the same issue, In chapter 4, at the end of that chapter, he talks about we're killed all the day long. We're counted as sheep for the slaughter. Our outward man perish, yet our inward man is renewed day by day. Then you get into chapter 5, and look what he talks about. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, what is your earthly house? That's your body. If the earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. What do you suppose that is? That's a body that God's going to get, not made with hands. Look at verse 2. For in this we groan in pain? No, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. The Bible is defining this groan as an earnest desire for something. Not, but within ourselves, groaning for something. If so be that being clothed, we shall not, this is important, shall not be found naked, for we that are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened. And I thought, okay, being burdened, not for that we would be unclothed, but clothed upon that mortality might be swallowed up of life. Now, I don't want to teach you all about 2 Corinthians, but I have to straighten this out for you. What this, if so be clothed will not be found naked, he's saying this. Remember what he's talking about? He's talking about this earthly house, and we have a house not made with hands, and we groan earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house from heaven. He's saying, you're not groaning to get rid of the old body. In other words, he says, if so be that being clothed we shall not be found naked. That whole thing there in verse 3 and 4 is, it's not just about getting rid of the old house so we can quit hurting. It's about getting the new house so we can go to work. And isn't that the response of a son who understands suffering? Oh God, I just can't wait till the day I die and this suffering is over. Isn't that glorifying? You know what that is? That's moaning. It does, see, he's saying it's not about just getting rid of the old house. It's about getting the new house. Because you already know from Romans, when you get that new house, something is about to happen. The difference between the groan of the creature and the groan of a son is that the creature is groaning, I'm hurting and I need help. And the son is groaning, I can't wait to get up there and help you. That's the difference in our groan. And what threw me was because groan showed up in 22 and it showed up in 23, I tried to make them the same. So I made this one the groan of, I'm hurting. And then I made this one the groan of, we're hurting. But that didn't seem, first of all, to jive with the proper response of a son to suffering. The second thing is, when I saw that, you can't get away from this. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house from heaven. He's not talking about groaning. So what's the next verse? Did I take you back to Romans 8? Yeah, look here. Even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. Why did it? Now I'm going to cover this, but why did he say it that way? Why did he just say, we groan within ourselves, waiting for the redemption of our body? Because that sounds like what you're after is to quit hurting. You're not, do you know what? Your adoption, yes, now back me up. Your adoption involves the redemption of your body, but that redemption of your body is for a purpose, which you have now already learned. The dispensation of grace is about the creature and what needs to be done in him and what you're going to need to be able to do it. And so when he says we groan with, And I know it sounds simple now, but when I was going through that, I thought, okay, well, this thing is actually groaning in pain, and then this thing is, okay, we're groaning in pain, waiting for the adoption, to wit. It sounds like we're just groaning around waiting till the day we quit hurting. Now I thought, well, wait a minute. Now that doesn't sound right. Then I read the 2 Corinthians 5 thing, and I thought, well, that's not at all what that groan is about. And I know he's bringing them back to Romans doctrine. That's the very issue he's talking about. Being clothed upon with our house from heaven, not made with hands. So then I thought, oh, well, then the groaning then is that earnestly desiring. So then I made this one, the earnestly desiring. For the whole creation earnestly desires and travails in pain. Well, wait a minute. Those are odd bedfellows in a sentence, aren't they? I thought that's a clumsy way to do it. Only finally did I get a chance to look at this and go, that's one kind of groan for the creature, but that's a different kind of groan for a son. You have no idea the thing I went through to get to that. Thank you. So I feel so much better. Because we were not going to leave that alone until we got that. When he says waiting for the adoption, he's not just waiting to get a body to get out of hurt. It's because of what the adoption is about. See, the emphasis here is on the adoption. To wit, give me that next slide. Now that, to wit is a little phrase that means that is to say, or namely, the redemption of our body. Now, this is one of those times when what you already know robs you of the impact of what we just read. Give me, that's the end. Back me up one slide. There you go. You already know you're going to get a new body. Even though it hasn't yet been called a glorified body, we always refer to it that way, and we already know about it. But when you're coming through the book of Romans, the only thing you really know is that you have been redeemed. You know your body didn't get redeemed, and you know that's a problem, but you haven't been told what's going to happen with that. And when you get down to this part, and he's talking about the earnest expectation of the creature, and the creature was made subject to vanity, and the creature's under the bondage of corruption, and the whole creation's under the bondage of corruption, and you may be under the bondage of corruption, but the groaning that the whole creation does is for relief, and the groaning that you're doing is not for relief from those things, but it's to get up there and do the work that your Father has designed for you to do. And when you have that working in you, you're really not just waiting to get your body fixed, you're waiting for the adoption, which will not happen until the consummation of your... By the way, when you get the redemption of your body, school's over. Where you are, that's the level you're going to be stuck into the creature at. And that redemption, yes, it will be over for you. But folks, you're supposed to groan for that even on days when you feel good. See, it's not just, man, my back is killing me today. Oh, God, I want that glorified body. And then the next day you go, woo, you know what? Hold off on that. Feel pretty good today. I don't really, just don't get in a big rush here. Yeah, I mean, yesterday I was kind of under duress, but today I'm good. No, a son is supposed to be groaning for that. Now, I'm gonna tell you what's coming up in the next lesson, because here we are. We're at the end. I'm going to tell you what's coming up. I'll tell you why getting that groan right was so important. The first checkpoint that you got to was to say, Abba, Father. And that meant I understand what's being offered to me, and I want it. The second checkpoint is contained right here in verse 23. When you're groaning, it's not just to get out of the aches and pains, but your groaning is to put your adoption to work in that redeemed body. That's the checkpoint that says this establishment is getting done in you. And if you don't see that grown right, you miss that checkpoint. And this is an important, this is how you know I'm getting ready, I'm ready to move on. We got 2 more verses, yes, but all they are concluding verses to continue the application that just got made to you here. You understand, the last 3 verses, you've been given the doctrine, and then he comes to 23 and he says, now I'm going to take all of this, and now I'm going to make an application of all of this. And at the end of this 3-verse application, 23, 24, and 25, you're going to reckon verse 18 to be a living reality. And the way you're going to know if you're on your way to that is if you're just growing it. Yeah, look, there's a couple things you don't know yet. I mean, you may know something about this in your head, but in the curriculum, we haven't gotten it yet. And that is this. Ultimately, there is absolutely nothing that your Heavenly Father allows to happen to you that isn't to your benefit. Really and truly. You may look at it and say, I don't get it. But really, it is for your greater benefit. And the more we go through this, the more you're going to understand that concept. The second thing, and I'll just mention it to you because we kind of talked about it on the way in today, there are things that your Heavenly Father knew needed to be done in the redemptive act of Jesus on the cross that had to be done for you that have never even entered your mind. Oh, we all know, yes, the sin issue needed to get dealt with, and yes, we need to be given spiritual fitness so we could be utilized by God, and that involves a justification and sanctification. You're going to encounter things that God did for you through His Son on the cross that absolutely had to be done, and when you look at it, you're going to say, I never even thought about that in my life. And your jaw is going to drop in awe at the wisdom of your Heavenly Father that what He has done in that redemption is so complete. I mean, this is not it. The redemption of your body, but really, if all you were doing is coming through your Bible in the sense and sequence that, it's laid out for you, when you get to the end of verse 23, that's when we all should be standing and cheering right here, because this is the first time you get told, oh boy, this thing is going to get redeemed. You know it. That's the impact. But because we already know it, we go, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. Okay, what's next? I'll have some Fritos. I mean, just like it's not that big a deal. It's a huge deal. And so your Father is giving you this, and that groan is something that you're going to look at now, and you're going to say, even on a good day, when you feel great, there's supposed to be something inside of you saying, I'm really looking, I'm earnestly desiring the day when I can get up there and go to work with my Father. Because I got to tell you, if that's not working in you, then we missed something somewhere. We have 2 more verses to go, and then we'll be through with this first section. I'm showing you the checkpoint, and I'm going to ask anybody to raise their hand. It's going to be up to you, and you've got to spend time with these verses and allow them to do the work in you that they're designed to do. You've got to see them, but all I'm really doing is making sure that when you're looking at this verse, you're looking at what you're supposed to be looking at. So as far as this particular verse goes, anybody have a question about it? I got 2 minutes left, so we'll splurge. Anybody got about what we've covered so far? I know there's plenty of interesting things we could talk about, but your Father's not talking about those because this is what you need. Is there anything unclear about what you're supposed to perceive out of this verse? Is there anything unclear about what these verses are all pointed at and designed to do? They're establishing you in your sonship so that verse 18 really does become a reality for you, that you know no matter what I go through, even if it costs me my life, it is not worthy to be compared with what my Father has waiting for me. And when that's a living reality for you, look, you do realize, I hate to say it this way. Look, cut the camera off. I don't want to say this on the camera because I don't want to have to